welcome back to the Straight Talk Podcast. This is Tim Adams, and I know that we said that this episode was going to be on healing and restoration. However, as those of you loyal listeners have probably figured out, our schedule has been a little crazy the last couple of weeks, hence why we haven't been able to get an episode out until now. So, unfortunately, my partner is resting. So, fortunately for her, it's what she needs. But unfortunately for us, because she can't join us. However, we are going to do a couple episodes, and then hopefully that will give her enough time to get rested up. So, the new topic for episode 11 is ego versus leadership. And I might step on some toes here, but I think there are a lot of egos out there masquerading as leadership. And what do I mean by that? It can be a fine line between being confident in your leadership of the church and sometimes being stoic and choosing to die on a particular hill, fight a particular battle because it's important to you. That's one thing. It's quite another when you're bullying people around because that's your leadership style. Basically, give me what I want, do what I tell you to do. A very controlling, domineering personality. Or I'm not even going to call that a personality. I'm going to say that is an approach to life that is born out of trauma. And this fits very well into, actually right in between our wounding episode and our healing and restoration episode, because this is one of the byproducts of those wounds that we talked about in the last episode. And it's important to understand what it can look like. I previously shared a story about a client, a pastor, who had a very large ego and claimed that he and I had a conversation about a particular part of an upgrade that we never talked about, other than it needed to be better than what was there before. That was my mandate. That was the limit of the parameters that I was given, or the extent, I should say, of the parameters I was given. We met that. He claimed that we didn't. And the reason, as far as I can tell, that he claimed that we hadn't hit that mark was because he had chosen to not be present physically for the upgrade. He was pursuing a degree, and for whatever reason chose, or maybe the timing was chosen for him. I don't know the background on that. I don't know how dissertations work, but either way, he was not present. And so he had returned at kind of the tail end of the upgrade and decided that he didn't like one aspect of what we had done. So that was a lesson for me in terms of establishing more specificity up front. And this is something that you can take in terms of your projects at your churches, be it capital improvement, AV upgrades, ministry improvements, that kind of thing. Be sure to be very specific about what the goals are going to be, and make sure everybody that is involved in that project is on the same page with that, so that everybody understands what the expectations are. But getting back to ego versus leadership, I think it's very important to understand that ego is self-focused. And leadership is others focused. A good leader does not whip those under them from behind, but rather they act like those oaks of righteousness that we read about in the Bible, designed to shelter those that are in their care under their branches. What does that look like in terms of being a pastor at a church? For me personally, I think a good leader is one that leads from the front, one that's not afraid to get down in the trenches and get dirty with those that they are delegating responsibilities to, those that they work with. And I think that phrase right there says everything that needs to be said. They work with. The people that they work with do not work for them. There might have to be some kind of official hierarchy in the way that the office works, or the ministries are cascaded out. You have the pastors, you have deacons and elders, you have the church board or council, you have ministry leaders. However your structure is, I think it's very important to understand that whoever is at the top, oftentimes that is the pastor, it's important that they do not get separated from the people that are in charge of the ministries and basically the rest of the church. I think the larger a church grows, the easier it is for the people in the church, and particularly the lay leaders in the church, to lose touch with the main leader of the church, the pastor. We look at mega churches. There's no way that Joel Osteen knows every single member, or probably has even met every single member in his church, let alone have some semblance of a relationship with them. Now, maybe that's not necessary. And you can have associate pastors, you can have paid ministry leaders that can help shoulder that load. But for me, I think it's important that a pastor remains approachable, remains relatable. They are not so caught up in their own celebrity or their own success that they lose touch with reality. They remain grounded, and they understand personally what it's like to be struggling, and to be honest about that. I think so often in the church, we have a tendency to put our church faces on when we go to church. That old, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing great. God is good." "Yes, He is. We'll see you later. Have a blessed week. I'll pray for you." That's just fake. Now, you can't be truly authentic and sincere with everybody that you come across at church. But I think that if you're going to ask how somebody's doing, you should only ask that if you actually mean it, and you actually want to stick around and hear them out and how they're really doing. And that's actually something that I do. Somebody asks, and I'm real with them. I say, "Well, it's been actually pretty tough." And it's interesting to gauge their reactions, because for some people it catches them off guard. They're not prepared for a sincere answer. Others will recover, and they've already got the correct canned answer already ready to go. "Oh, well, that sounds hard. I'll pray for you," and they're gone. And again, I understand it's hard to be vulnerable with everybody. And in fact, we shouldn't be. because we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a fallen society, so we have to take steps to protect ourselves. But I do believe that we should actively foster relationships where we can be sincere, where we can be real and honest and blunt and direct with each other. But do so in love. And what does that look like? I think at the core of that is a shared understanding, a shared belief that my heart towards you is for your good, and I trust that your heart towards me is for my good. Yes, that takes vulnerability, absolutely. But that is the only way to build true and deep relationship. And I think pastors have a really difficult time making friends like that in a church, particularly if you're in a denomination. I know in the Adventist denomination, it's very typical for pastors to be moved around by the conference, which is the organizing structure above the local churches. And it's not atypical for a pastor to be in place anywhere from 3 years to 6 years, and then they get shuffled off to somewhere else as needs around the territory or the region change. For non-denominational churches, I think that's less of an issue. You generally have a church that is started by a pastor or a couple, and it just kind of grows around them. And if they ever leave, that church could very likely fail because it is so centric on the couple or the pastor that started it. And so you generally, in my experience, you tend to see those pastors staying in place a lot longer. But overall, I think it's easy to let the busyness of life distract us or tempt us to be shallow with each other. But that's not where relationship comes from. And particularly now, we have this me first culture, and you can see it everywhere. You see it online, people posting their daily lives. Like, there are some people that are way too comfortable with sharing information online that, one, nobody really wants to know, and two, it is just not appropriate. I'm just going to say it. We also see this influencer culture where you're constantly, if you're an influencer, you're constantly having to one-up yourself in terms of entertainment. Now, some influencers, the topic or the genre that they're in doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. I don't necessarily consider podcasters such as myself influencers. I think we are more of a grassroots talk show host. We are generally subject matter experts who just want to share. And in the process of what they call the long tail, the audience will generally find the content that they seek. And technology does help with that. But this me first culture, you see it every day you go out on the roads. People cutting each other off. You see drivers zipping in and out of traffic at insane speeds. And all in an effort to do what? Like, what is the goal? Well, it's to get where they're going faster. And what is the attitude that drives that? Well, at some level, it's a superiority complex, is it not? I'm better than you are. I'm more important than you are. You're less important than I am. And, not only is it dangerous, but it's stupid. And I've long said that if you want to get somewhere on time, and to get there on time, you have to engage in driving behaviors like that, then leave earlier. Now, it's not always possible, I understand that, but I am something of an idealist, so bear with me. But I think more worryingly, what we're seeing in our culture is really a self-idolatry. And I hate to put it this way, but at least here in America, it very much feels like we're in a post-God society. We idolize ourselves. We idolize each other. We idolize these individuals that have the body we want, can do makeup the way that we would like to, can have achieved success and are willing to help us do the same. Whatever it is that we think we want, we can go and find somebody that has already done it. And we can live vicariously through any number of people surrounding any number of topics. But what is the ultimate effect of that? Well, the effect of that is twofold, as I see it. One is that it encourages us actively to seek out God less and less. And it's been so subtle in its temptation and in its application that we have largely gone along with it. I mean, how many Gen Z kids do you know that are constantly on their devices? How many times, again, go driving, how many times have you been sitting in traffic and people are on their phones while they're driving? I mean, it's absolutely insane. We are addicted to being connected. The problem is we're addicted to being connected to each other virtually, at arm's length, and yet we're not addicted to being connected to God. And it's really sad to watch. I catch myself falling into this trap all the time. It's very pernicious. But all of this self-idolatry, this self-glorifying, this pay attention to me because I have a platform. I mean, we see it with the rise of the Karens. People engaging in insane behavior because they don't like that you're doing something, or they don't like what you have to say. Look at the degradation in social discourse. It's frightening how far we've fallen in terms of being able to have actual discussions with opposing points of view without resorting to name-calling or violence. It's mind-boggling how quickly that turnaround has happened. But in terms of you pastors, something else that we're seeing that's coming out of that, in this constant pressure to deliver, this constant pressure to create memorable content that is going to go viral, we're starting to see pastors and churches engage in very controversial practices. And, you know, there are influencers online who make, you know, little reels on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook where they expose some of the at best questionable and at worst just downright wrong theology and teachings that are not biblically based. And it reminds me of what we see foretold in Revelation and Daniel that, there will be false teachers. And it's important that we know the word in terms of being able to defend, as Christ did in the wilderness against Satan, to defend what is right, to defend ourselves from deception, from the allure of power and greed and selfishness, and essentially to not be of the world, to not follow what everybody else is doing, but knowing in our heart that the path that we are choosing is correct, because that is the path that God has set before us, and it's not what the world wants us to do. There's been a shaking over the last few years in the church. I don't think anybody's going to argue with me on that. There's been a shaking of the world. And I think what we're starting to see is that separation between the sheep and the goats, between the wheat and the chaff. And those two groups, I believe, are going to become even more polarized as time goes on. And there will be a very distinct division between the two. But all of that to say, I would encourage you to take some time in prayer, away from distractions, away from other people. Take a dog day, like we've talked about doing, and really seek out what your underlying motivations are in terms of the mission, the calling that you have, and understand what comes from God and what comes from yourself. Because at the end of the day, we need to be glorifying and lifting up Christ and God and the Holy Spirit, and not ourselves. And I think one of the defining characteristics of good, strong leaders is that they don't raise themselves up. They raise up other people. And I really hope and pray that you are one of those leaders. And if you're not, then let's walk through that. Let's talk about why you feel that way, and how maybe if that is indeed true, how we might be able to get you back to being a strong leader where you're focused on other people and not yourself. So I look forward to hearing from you guys. As always, please join us in our Stay Touch group. You can find the links for that down in the description below. And I'm not going to do the like, comment, follow, subscribe, and all that, because personally I hate it when people do that. Please follow me. But if you do find this beneficial, I do invite you to pray about people that you might share it with on a one-on-one basis. I'm certainly not going to ask you guys, unless you feel led, to share this publicly, this podcast. But the idea is to just be of service, to open up conversations and dialogues with pastors and ministry leaders, to talk about really the honest truth of the difficulties and the obstacles and the situations and crazy people that you come in contact with, and maybe share ideas and solutions that you've seen work, to be a resource. That's really the goal of this podcast, and that can't happen without you. So thank you for being here, for being willing to listen to me ramble on and on. And I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you, should the Spirit move. And we'll see you next time.